Greetings, this is Miles from Milestone Investing. I've been watching a video on Reginald Lewis, a lawyer turned entrepreneur who, on the back of a number of leveraged buyout deals, he was able to become famous for being the first Black American to become a billionaire. And he did it through basically the acquisition of businesses. And I want to just listen to that video and explain what the ingredients are of his success.
Reginald F. Lewis was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1942. He was raised by a tight-knit family that nurtured a sound education, unyielding pride, and a strong work ethic.
My grandfather said, know your job, and you'll never be in a bread line.
But Lewis had another dream. He was an intense, driven risk-taker who wanted the power and the money from the world of high finance, and he wanted to be the first African-American to get it.
I remember that Reg decided that he was going to put more time into venture capital, and he wanted to form a company that he decided to call TLC Group, which he never would admit, but we think it was for the Lewis companies. That's what TLC stand for.
He would always talk, at night when the children are asleep, about the business, about what's happening. I think it's his way of decompressing. I always consider it like there's a ball of string in his head. And just by talking about it slowly, it's coming out and it clarifies his mind.
If you have a core set of values, like family, like hard work, like trust, and these are things that will stay with you even when you may be having a difficult time in a specific problem. But if you maintain the core values, you can generally ride through any particular problem, and then in the end, will be able to be pleased with the result.
He wanted to be seen not just as an African-American businessman. He wanted the message to be that he was an American businessman, that he was a success in his own right, that he was not some sort of a token or some sort of ethnic person who they picked and put in there. He wanted to demonstrate that it was his hard work, his intelligence, and his drive that made him a success.
By the time the early 80s arrived, Lewis had experienced several failed business acquisitions, yet he was undeterred. Instead of stopping, he went after an acquisition that was bigger and bolder than anything he had attempted so far.
Any deals that we saw were always warmed over or nobody else wanted to do it. So the McCall Pattern Company became available, and the reason it was available is because the number of units sold in that industry had declined for 10 straight years, yet McCall was still profitable.
Lewis wanted to close big leverage buyout deals. To make all the numbers work, he had to buy a mature company with a predictable, stable cash flow, which would allow him to pay off the tremendous debt once the deal was done. The big question was, who could help him get the financing done?
The role of investment bankers is one of the great mysteries of the universe. The simple fact is that you don't hire investment bankers, you hire people. Because Phyllis Schless had labored for many years on Wall Street with one of the top investment banks, Bear Stearns, I wanted her thoughts about the best price to pay for McCall.
We needed to get Reg in touch with the people who were selling McCall, and we needed to get him treated seriously. So the first thing I did was to basically bridge him to the establishment.
In the McCall Pattern transaction, my role was to provide the senior financing, $19 million out of the $22.5 million. That was the sale. Getting the bank part was.
Okay, Peter Offman, he actually revealed that the McCall Pattern Company, he was going to provide £90 million out of £22.5 million purchase price, and this represents 85%. So this is like a 85% mortgage on a property deal. So the senior financing is providing 85% of this money. And obviously, once he gives the money, there's going to be interest that's being generated from that. And that interest is paid through the cash flows from the company.
The tough part in the early days of leverage buyouts. And 83 was the very early days. I have to admit, when I first met Reg, I wasn't told that he was black. So it was a little bit of a surprise when I walked out of my office. There weren't that many black entrepreneurs in New York City at the time. In my thinking, I put aside completely the fact that he was black. I didn't see how it should or could be part of the decision.
Then things weren't moving fast enough for Reg. He wanted it to close instantly.
I felt I was stuck on the McCall deal and was not sure whether Bear Stearns was trying to scuttle the deal or not. I decided to give them a little competition.
And Reg went out behind my back, literally, and he talked to other investment bankers and people. Maybe they could move faster, he thought. We dropped him. Bear dropped him because he breached our agreement. A week later, I got a phone call that said, "I'm really sorry." There were words I never thought I would hear out of his mouth, ever. "If I double your fees, will you take me back?" We initially had a fee, I think, of $250,000. He doubled it to $500,000, which was not a lot of money, but it was 1983.
Okay, so essentially, he needed the help of Phyllis Schless from Bear Stearns to really open the door and give him access and give him credibility with the seller of this company and all the contacts and resources necessary to make this deal work.
First of all, once we bought McCall, all of a sudden we were in a different tier. You know, we were now owners, or Reg was now an owner of a decent-sized company with a brand name. It's amazing how things changed after that. All of a sudden we were getting telephone calls. Everybody wanted to interview Reg. You know, it was a huge deal.
TLC bought McCall Pattern Company with $1 million.
Okay, so the narrator just told us that TLC bought this company, McCall, with $1 million. So that's a 5% deposit on the $22.5 million purchase price. It made it sound like that it was £1 million for the whole deal, but obviously we know from the banker that it was 22 and 19 was a senior financing, which means that $2.25 million was funded through another source. Okay, and so the total debt undertaken would have been 95% financing, or 21.4 million, and here's 1.1 million basically bridged the gap to make it 22.5, which allowed him to basically close the deal.
And only 3 years later sold it for an astounding $90 million.
Okay, so now we know 3 years later, in 1986, he sells the same company he bought for 22.5. He now sells it for 90 million. Well, he owes 21.4 million. He owes that money to the previous creditors. And there's clearly going to be an additional amount of money he has to pay. They may have some equity. We don't know what the deal would have been on the second high yield financing part. But the bottom line is this, and let's pretend he had to give him another £10 million on top. Let's make it up. So that basically means out of 68, he's now got 58 million that goes to himself or the TLC group. So basically they sell the deal for 90, they pay off the debts, okay, maybe some more on top. And so they have anywhere between, I'll make it up now, 58 and 68 million pounds is what they got left over out of the 90 million pound deal. They got the equivalent of between 50 and 68, okay?
This single investment cemented Lewis's place as a major Wall Street financier and a prominent corporate takeover dealer. Around the time of the closing of the McCall Pattern Company, Lewis got a tip about an even bigger business opportunity. Beatrice International, an enormous global food company, was about to be sold. Lewis had the audacity to go for it, but he needed the financial backing of a businessman and company who were leaders in financing these deals. He reached out to Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert.
He persuaded me at Hello when he accomplished at McCall Pattern, a company that I would have never bought because I didn't feel that strongly about the industry. And the minute he showed me his plan for Beatrice International, he had me.
In those days, the high-yield piece of the business, though, was really dominated by Drexel. There wasn't anybody else.
Okay, so what Henry Kravitz has told us is that the high-yield part of the deal, which is really the 10% part, or maybe even 15%, depends how much they're giving, that high-yield part was the specialization of a company called Drexel, Burnham, Lambert. And the main player in the 1980s was a banker called Michael Milken. And I believe in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, he was named as the highest paid individual in corporate America. He was number one. And he was so popular that he just became a superstar in the world of banking. Unfortunately, he had a downfall and for insider trading, and as a consequence, he went to prison and he effectively lost his career. However, at the time, he was the equivalent of Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls. He was absolutely well famous, and anybody who was paying attention in the 1980s, and I certainly was, knew this person's name, Michael Milken. And this guy on the screen is the CEO of a company called KKR, which stands for Kohlberg Kravis Roberts. And they basically were they themselves were a venture capital firm where they were doing the same kind of deals that Reggie was doing, but on a much bigger scale.
Of any significance that was in the high yield piece. And you needed that high yield piece for him to get his whole financing done.
You needed this high yield piece to get the whole financing done, okay?
One of the major challenges for black entrepreneurs was and is access to capital. And what Reggie was able to do from some of the top financial firms in the marketplace was to articulate a vision and a rationale, and in fact engender a level of credibility that people provided him with the capital. And that was extraordinary.
Okay, this young man here, who is the CEO of American Express, he essentially is telling us that Reginald Lewis is an entrepreneur who is essentially seeking opportunities to own companies, turn them around, make them better, and then sell them on at a later time. Entrepreneurs was doing in the 1980s. What we describe as entrepreneurs today, which is someone basically selling shoes on Amazon, is a very different order of entrepreneur. It's a very different order. What entrepreneurs was doing in those days, the company itself was the product. So they would buy and sell a whole company. They'll buy and sell the company, not buy and sell their product in a company. So, you know, someone selling trainers, that's a product. But someone buying and selling, say, Sports Direct, that's a company. And if you're buying and selling Sports Direct, or if you're buying and selling Barclays Bank, that's a different order of magnitude for an entrepreneur than what a lot of people talk about in 2019 as an entrepreneur, which I find very instructive.
We had many other people around the world approaching us whether we would finance them to buy Beatrice. It was clear that Beatrice International situation, that Reg knew it better than anyone. I think he knew it better than KKR.
Now, check this out. This was Michael Milken was the man who was going to offer the financing to allow Reginald to buy the company. And Reginald, according to what he's saying in this piece here, Reginald knew the business better than the current owners, KKR. In other words, he's done his homework. He was credible, and he had plans to make it a better company, better than the original owners who had it and maybe got tired of it and was maybe less creative. But his team, and remember, he wasn't by himself. Entrepreneurs are not solopreneurs. He's actually in a team, and his team, no doubt, all have the expertise necessary to be highly, effective individuals. And so we're talking about basically Premier Division entrepreneurship here.
Who owned the company at the time, and he had a plan.
Reginald Lewis knew that if he was going to pull this deal off, the sale would be of historic proportions. The key to this huge acquisition was figuring out how to make the tax components of this deal work, and how to double the cash flow in order to pay off the massive debt. If Lewis failed, he would lose everything. His bold gamble? Sell off parts of Beatrice International's worldwide operation at the same time that he was buying it.
Okay, so I don't know if they mentioned the price yet, but I'll do a little spoiler alert. They end up paying £985 million for this particular company, Beatrice International. That was the final deal, which was accepted by KKR. Now, we know that financing of 85% of that, which is 837, can be done by a senior financier. There was a high yield part, which has to kind of bridge the gap. And let's pretend, because it doesn't say, let's pretend that Reginald TLC had to put down 5%. Well, 5% of 985 million is basically 49 million. So where does he get this from? The previous deal. I said anywhere between 50 and 68 would have been what they could keep from the previous deal. He can now lever this money into this deal. He's now got a deposit. He's now got to go find the rest. Okay? And with a plan to make the whole company more profitable than he finds it and generate more cash flow to service the loans that are going to be here until the exit strategy comes. This is the game plan to make this one work.
The deal closing process itself was full of drama. We got a call from Drexel saying, you guys are going to have to come out here to Beverly Hills and you're going to have to explain to us what the tax deduction is going to be or no deal.
Well, there's a lot of negotiations going on between the senior people at Drexel and Reg and his team, and therefore there is always tension.
The closing of the Beatrice International deal took place on November 29, November 30 of 1987. That was, at least to that point, a very unique point in history because Wall Street had had a total meltdown the prior month in 1987. No transactions were being closed. The fact that we were able to close a gargantuan deal, novel for its time, given its international character, was just, it was absolutely off the charts.
Now, one of the reasons why this was possible, because he said that in October of 1987, Wall Street itself was going through a meltdown. The reasons, and Wall Street is based in New York is on the East Coast. One of the reasons why he wasn't blocked by the Wall Street meltdown, because he was with Drexel Burnham Lambert, and this company was actually based on the West Coast in California, and they were outside of the direct influences of Wall Street. And because of this, and they got their money from Hollywood. Hollywood stars is where Michael Milken used to go to get his money. And so he was ridiculously influential at the time. And because of him and them being outside of the Wall Street machine, this is what made him able to do what others in Wall Street could not do.
I think KKR knew we were going to have the highest bid and was going to go with us all along, but they created doubt in our minds so that we effectively topped our own bid and increased it to $985 million. But that ultimately took it.
I remember the day of the announcement of the Beatrice acquisition, and I remember calling him to congratulate him and telling him how proud he was. But I remember all the calls that went around the country of African Americans saying, this is absolutely incredible. It was historic.
In becoming the CEO of Beatrice International, Lewis was catapulted into an exclusive group of business leaders at the pinnacle of industry.
He bought 64 companies in 31 countries for almost $1 billion. So in that sense, he is a pioneer. No African American has done ever a big deal like that on a leveraged buyout. And so when it hit the press, it was like front pages all over.
The extraordinary level of debt and taxes the Beatrice International deal generated could have resulted in a financial disaster. But Lewis had the business acumen to prevent that from happening. He closed the deal and then immediately stepped up to the monumental job of running his global business empire.
So when I was 9, my dad took me on one of his tours of his factories. We started off in Ireland at the potato chip factory, and then we went to Spain to the ice cream factory, and then we went to Belgium to the bottling company. And my dad talks to me and says, you know, this is the real business, Christina. This costs like 3 cents, and they sell it for $3.
Reginald Lewis reveals to his daughter Christina what the real business deal is. All this high financing to get acquisition to the business is not the key to all of this, because he's got this massive debt. The key to it is, can this business wash its own face? When he puts all his debt into the company, can the company pay this debt and be profitable on top? And he reveals the secret. The unit price of whatever the item was, either crisps or ice cream, whatever it was she's talking about, she doesn't reveal it here. She says the unit price was 3 cents, and they're selling it for 300 cents or $3. That is a 10,000% gross margin. When you have a massive margin like that, you have lots of wiggle room to basically finance all kinds of stuff, including large debt. And when you have high volume and high margin, you have actually got the best combination any business can actually have. That's the number one key right there. High volume, high margin. And because we're talking about 64 companies in 31 countries, which is all international, the volumes are there. He has high volumes. And now with this massive high margin, you've got a winner.
Like this is the business.
There is no doubt that Reginald Lewis's success paved the way for me and many others. And I think that really is the test and demonstration of real leadership, is what is the foundation that you have created? What is the legacy that you've left?
The Reginald F. Lewis International Law Center is the result of a $3 million gift that my father gave to Harvard Law School before he passed away. It was the largest donation that they'd ever received from a living individual, period. Not just black person, period, for Harvard Law School.
Lewis cared deeply about how to inspire talented people to do their best work.
Oh, it's working on.
And his daughter, Christina, continues his mission by creating a foundation that teaches computer programming to young African American and Latino men.
All-Star Code is creating a new generation of Reginald Lewises. Did you make this?
Yeah.
Very good. Cool. We're also creating the next generation of coders, video game designers, and computer repairmen.
That pioneering spark of entrepreneurship which ignited Reginald F. Lewis as a teenager never went out. Even in the face of adversity and extraordinary obstacles, he accomplished what few have been able to do. At a convocation speech at the University of New Mexico School of Law, he delivered a message of hope and determination.
When we're confronted with a challenge or working against superior resources or superior odds, I frequently wonder whether what we're doing is worth the effort. And somehow I remember all of the people who went before who had even greater odds. So if there's one message that I would like to leave to the class of 1990, it is that you keep going to build a better society in America, to be a compassionate America, that you keep going no matter what. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I think Reginald Lewis' story is not only is it very inspirational, but actually very telling, because in the 1980s, an entrepreneur on his caliber, Premier Division, was buying and selling companies. They were not buying and selling products and running the company as an individual company. They were buying and selling the company, making the company better, and going from £22 million, McCall Patent Company, to a valuation of 90 million, understanding exactly what that all means. And that was the business they were in. They were in buy a company, improve it, sell the company. Buy a company, improve it, sell the company. That was what they were doing as entrepreneurs. Now, if we can actually get back to the original idea of entrepreneurship, not buying and selling trainers or buying and selling, bags of crisps, but buying and selling Walker's crisps, buying and selling JD Sports, now we're playing a different game. I hope you found this video useful. This is Miles from Milestone Investing. Have a great day.